So welcome everybody to today's webinar where we're going to take a look at Creo Illustrate. And what Creo Illustrate is a product that will take your CAD files and you can use those into technical publications. And instead of having to create any new documents, you could use those the CAD files. And the thing that's kind of cool about it is it works with any CAD system pretty much. It's not necessarily anchored to Creo only, which is pretty cool. So we're going to take a look at that today. My name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI, and the wizard behind Creo Illustrate's the Creo Illustrate presentation and demo today is Paul Dye, a solutions consultant and applications engineer from the PTC's Virtual Center of Excellence. He's going to do this presentation and lead everything today. So Paul, thank you very much for leading. And also on our panel is our Director of Marketing, Jeff Gavio. If you have any questions, please type those into the chat box. We'll try to answer those as we go along, but we will definitely answer all questions by the end of the webinar. So Paul, you have control. We see your screen. Take it away, my friend.
All right. Thank you very much, Rob, and happy to be on, of course. Again, my name is Paul Dye, Solutions Consultant and Application Engineer here at PTC, and I'm going to be talking a little bit today around Creo Illustrate. It's a very simple to use tool, but at the same time, extremely powerful. So there's a lot that goes into it and a lot that I'm going to be going through and walking and really explaining about how we utilize it here. And I'll lay the foundation for this by, first and foremost, by talking about some of the real use cases that this plays into. Again, like Rob mentioned, if you have any questions, anything that you want me to explain further around, feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll probably take around 20 minutes today to go through everything and hopefully give you a good walkthrough of what everything that we do from within the context of Illustrate looks like. So by starting into this, again, talking about some of the challenges that we really look to address, and technical illustrations are very important for communicating, first and foremost, information about your products, your parts, your services. Essentially, throughout the organization, what you need is clear documentation. And then a lot of times you need it in different styles, different formats. One of the biggest problems that we typically see with customers is that it's very slow and really a tedious process to go through and manually create illustrations. And with that process being so slow, it's rare that you're ever working with the most updated information in that documentation. So something that most companies have and really normally have available is very rich or accurate CAD models. And with that, there's a lot of great information that you can work with. But the problem is the illustrators that are creating that documentation oftentimes either don't know, simply don't work with CAD, or just don't have the tools, or even if they do have CAD, whether it be Creo, SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, those tools really don't provide what you need for the illustrator to do their work. And what it leads to a lot of times, or what we typically see, is engineers, designers being the ones that end up creating the technical publication. And that's not really what we want to be doing here. We're really using the wrong tool to do that. The designers should be designing and working with CAD, not building out the illustrations to be used over in a manual. And plus, it tends to be a very serial process where you're not even able to start into an illustration process until the design process is complete. So all the time that you could be spending working on illustrations, documentation, you end up just waiting around. And one of the biggest reasons for that serial process is because if you have design changes, then you need to have manual updates because of that. And that's the way the world works nowadays. Parts, models, they're always being changed, they're always being updated. So we have to be able to account for that. Or even worse, a model or assembly gets changed and updated, but then the service documentation doesn't get updated or the manual doesn't get updated. Well, that's going to cause grief for customers, users. It's something we need to be able to avoid. So a lot of main use cases that we really look to play into here, and these are all challenges that we look to address with Creo Illustrate. Now, at a high level, this is a Creo application that's been designed to create detailed illustrations directly from our 3D CAD data. So I'm going to be using all that CAD data, but I don't need to work with the actual CAD data itself. And really, Illustrate is built out for a non-CAD user to be able to utilize. It's more an illustration tool that's giving our illustrator the tools that they actually need and really care about. And one of the biggest things that I want to mention here, and something that Rob touched on earlier, is the fact that we don't care where the CAD data came from. It could be Creo, it could be a product view zip file, it could be a step file, third-party CAD, doesn't matter. We just bring it in and do our illustrations based off of that. And the results that we're going to get and what I'm going to go through and show a few examples of is rich 2D and 3D technical illustrations. And it's not just lines and arcs that we're working with. It could be the full bill of material structure. You have full control over the graphics. You can translate pieces, move things around, rotate components. It's very easy to control all of that from the model itself. And then from that point, be able to build out callouts. It's something that I could manually define if I'd like to, or it has intelligence built into it to have the system build that out for you. The system understands the components, the subassemblies, so very quickly be able to get to exploded views, for example, where you can have all of your callouts included. And from that point, we have an extendable library for different symbols, different graphics that you want to pull in, hands, tools, arrows that you might want to utilize. It's something that we have available out of the box, but it's also completely extendable as well. If there's any symbols or graphics that you want to use, you can feel free to bring those in. And from that point, again, a very extensive set of graphical techniques that we're going to use for building out all the different pieces of the figures that we're working with. Could be just plain figures, it could be animations as well. And you could go through and change the look and feel, add in thick and thin lines for changing how certain parts of the model are rendered, different cross-section views. Again, all things that are going to be important to the illustrator. A CAD designer might not care about something like thick and thin lines, but if you're putting these to be put into a piece of paper, a manual, or PDF, then let's give you the ability to create what's going to look best there. And like I mentioned as well, or touched on, is the fact that we also have the idea of working with animations. These can be a whole assortment of different steps if you'd like to display a certain process. You could show an assembly, show how everything gets put together, maybe gets taken apart. You can put all those different steps in, show how you might need to use certain tools in that process, and what would make it very clear for the front end user. And one of the biggest things that I want to mention here is the integration that you have and really all the different options that you have for publishing this content. So one thing to mention here too is the fact that we're fully integrated in with Windchill. So you can keep your information in Windchill, you can get your data from Windchill. It's all able to be tied together there as well. And then once you're ready to publish the illustration that you're working with, you have a lot of different options. So you could save off 3D files, 2D vector, 2D raster, image files, product view files. It just comes down to however you need to send it off downstream. All right, and with that, we can go ahead and jump into a demonstration so we can see what this really looks like in terms of the workflow from the Illustrate perspective. Go ahead and switch my screen here very quickly. There we go. I'll share back up my screen again. And let me know whenever you can see that. It should just be a blank Creo Illustrate canvas. I think we should be good.
We are good. We can see it.
Awesome. Yep. So this is going to be, if you've worked with Creo, it's going to be a fairly similar type of interface. You have the ribbon up at the top where you have all your different tools, figures, animations that you might want to build out. You also have your figures over here on the left-hand side. Over on the far left-hand side, you also have your bill of materials. So again, it's going to be similar to what you might work with for your design bill of materials, your engineering bill of materials, but then we could do that over here on the service side as well. So a couple of different figures that we're going to work through from there. Again, it's all going to be tied to this base illustration file that we're going to pull in. This could be from Creo, could be from a different system. Again, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to pull it in and do our work based off of it. All right, so again, this is going to have our model tree. You have all your assembly, you have your parts managed over there. So we're going to pull in this 3D source material and create our illustration from it. Like I mentioned earlier, if you needed to assemble certain things or move parts around, you could do that. You transform them, rotate them. You can hide or show anything that you might want to focus on, or if you only wanted to see a particular subsection of the assembly, feel free to hide anything that might not be as important for that process. And then you have the ability to work with this and change the render mode of the assembly. You could do shaded with edges. So we still have that rich model with all the colors, but highlighting on some of the harder edges. Or maybe this is going to be put into a service manual. So you want all the edges to show up nicely, but just in black and white. You could do that. And then also the creation of your exploded lines is very straightforward. all the different parts in the model know their home locations. So the fact that it's coming from that model makes it very quick and easy to go through, move things around, change things up. And then from that point, if you'd like to restore the location of one of those parts, it's just going to be a click away. So you just select it, say restore to your location, and you're good to keep going from there. You also have the option to have all the parts moved to their home location, whatever suits you best. You do have the option to change where those home locations are. So if you wanted to assemble two parts together that weren't initially together, you do have the option to do that as well. All right, and here we can get into some of the different options that we have. First and foremost, I can pull in different figures and symbols that we'd like to work with. So for example, here, if we needed to pull in a hammer to work with a certain step of that, we could pull that in and show it within the context of our assembly. So again, we have some out of the box tools that we could work with. You could also pull your own in as well. If you have certain signs or certain labels that you wanted to pull in for your different figures, you could do that as well. So maybe in this case, there might be a certain flammable piece of the process. We can go ahead and highlight on that. And very quickly, what I can do as well here is just touch on some of the properties and the info associated with this particular project that we're working with. First thing that you're going to see here is your source material. This is all the material that we brought in and are using to create the figures that we were looking at before. And one thing to note here is that everything here is linked to that product information and the design and data that we're actually pulling this from. So for example, if you were to have something update around that ski model, say the tracks got changed or something got moved around or a different feature got updated, what you'd be able to do is update the link here, and then you'd be able to regenerate that, and then all those changes would then get pushed down the line to any of the figures that you built out from that point. So making sure you have that link is going to be very valuable and something that, again, is going to make you more efficient as you're starting to build out these figures, making sure you have that full associativity down the line to all the figures that we're working with here. And figures can be multiple things, like I mentioned. It could be the entire assembly here. It could be the different sequences, call outs. So you can go through and quickly reference any of that we've built out from there. All right, so that's just a quick look there. Again, you have your properties over here on the right-hand side as well. And this is all just what's associated with our project. The project's going to be called a 3CDI file, and that contains all that information. All right, so from there, we can go ahead and keep working from here as well. So we'll walk through a couple of different examples. First one that you're seeing here is what I would call a phantom track mode. So you have this phantom part mode that you could have assigned to different parts of the model. In this case here, it's just giving us a nice view throughout the track. You can even select on parts right through there, but still have it in relation to the track on the outside. So really useful for showing things such as internal components, especially as your assemblies get larger. It's a very nice view to work with there. In this example here, what I also have is a 2D drawing that's been built off of a 3D parent. So Creo Illustrate has powerful 2D line drawing modes here that will project our 3D model onto a 2D vector projection. In this case here, I have hidden lines removed, and it makes it nice for me to work with my model. I have the ability here to go through and clean up any of those lines, delete things that I don't like, or add things in as I see fit. And one of the greatest things about this 2D drawing mode is the fact that it's linked to that 3D parent. That means if I were to come into the assembly here and say I want to make some changes, in this case, I'll just take one of these wheels and show it in more of an exploded or removed state, just whatever changes that you might want to make. What's going to happen is that the 2D drawing figure that's based off of this file is going to now say that it's out of date. So what it'll do is simply re-render itself based on that new configuration for the parent and then update for that. So it's a great way to make sure that you're getting all that information and making sure that everything's going to stay consistent throughout here as well. So looking back at this drawing, what you're seeing here is now the view's been updated for any of those changes, and you can look at it in that new configuration. All right, moving on from here, we can see Illustrate also supports formatting illustrates for particular page sizes. That's what the base for what we have here is. We have some different detail views. And one of the nice things that you're looking at here with these inset views is that they're all referencing the same parts from within the assembly. So if you select on a part in one view, it's going to update the other views as well. And here you can also see the different parametric associations that we have here and these annotations. So these are based off of attributes that we pulled in from the CAD model. So that means that for any of these parts, again, if you were to select on something, you could see all the different associated attributes that you have. This could be metadata from the part itself. It could be attributes from wind chill, things like part name, category, different values you have there. And that's what we have in the example above. We have, first and foremost, the native name that we have associated with this model. We have a part name and a different feature ID. That's all being brought in and displayed up on this view. So anything that might be important for your process, anything that you want to have displayed for your users, you'd be able to have here linked in with the model itself. All right. Now from here, we can go ahead and jump into an animation. So this is what we would call a sequence where we have a multiple different step assembly process that's laid out here. So animations in general give us the ability to really bring models to life. We can break them up into multiple different step-by-step procedures and use them in a lot of different ways. So playing through this, you could see here that the assembly highlights up on a certain part of the model and then shows how it's expanded. Also gives us a quick warning there that's showing that the spring is under compression. So what I can do from this point is kind of show you how this would work. So over here in our step editor, what we could do is manage the different steps in that procedure, along with the different effects and the timing for each of those steps. Looking at step 1 here, you could see all the different camera tracks that make up that animation. So if we were to scroll back through here, you could see exactly what it's going to do. And playing that back through, we could see that it's first going to flash, expand out, and then finally fade out. And same thing for step 2 in the process. So if you change the steps, you can see the keyframe editor also updates for the different effects that are being used here. In this case, it means changing the color of the spring and having that caution sign appear. And what I could do very quickly here as well is walk through the process of creating a new step. What I want to do is have the caution sign fade away and highlight on the next nut that needs to be removed. And as you can see, the effects are very easy to access. You just select whatever you want right up from the top bar here, and Illustrate makes it very straightforward to get those built out. Animations are extremely powerful. They're really bringing the models to life. It's not just words or maybe a picture on a page. It's very rich, meaningful content, leaves a lot less up to the imagination, and really does a great job of showing each of the steps there. All right, last view that we have down here is a more traditional exploded view. It's again still going to be very essential to a lot of people's processes. This is going through and showing all the different parts here that were within the subassembly. This is also a bill of materials view. So Creo Illustrate has the capability of attaching these different annotations to each of these parts, something that you could consume in a parts catalog viewer, or you could simply select on the parts that you're working with. They highlight right along in that view. And then you could see some of the tags that we have along with that in the table of information that's tied to that illustration. All right, so that really covers the different figures that we have in the project. What I could do now, if I'd like to, is go through some of the different options that I want to work with whenever it's time to publish these illustrations to be used in whatever application that has been designed for. So like you can see here, I can really select for each of those different figures how we'd like to have that published out, whether it's our 3D figures, our 2D drawing here. You can go ahead and get that published out as a vector projection. And with each of these, you have lots of different options whenever it comes to formatting them. So for example, here in our 3D figures, you could change here how your image files are getting created. You can see the formats and the units with height, a lot of options that you can change in there. And even more so here into your 2D illustrations. So really tailor those to the exact build and what it's going to look like for what you want it to come out as. Right, so that's a good look at the process. So again, a lot that we can do there, either on the 2D drawing side, on the 3D figures, animations, whatever it is that you want to have included in those figures, we're able to get through and build out there over in Illustrate. All right, so quickly there, just before I pass it off, I want to really hit home on some of the value that this really gives to you and working with this process. And first and foremost, I wanted to hit back on the fact that this is starting by having those illustrations all linked to that 3D source material. It's going to make it a lot faster for you to begin and build out those illustrations, and even that much faster whenever it comes to making the updates to those illustrations, whenever there's going to be changes to the CAD files that you're working with there. And I can do this process completely independent from the original engineering resources. So even if I'm getting some files from Creo, you might be getting some from another vendor, a third party, I can work completely in my own environment, and it's pain-free on my end. It's really cutting back on some of the duplicate work that you need to do, so you don't have to build out a new illustration every single time that the CAD designer needs to go through and make changes. Allows me to maximize the use of our illustrations and whatever documentation I'm building out, include more pictures, more detail at the same time, also increasing our accuracy along the way. So again, as the illustrator, helping me out in a lot of ways, and really from a business perspective, doing a lot as well, such as accelerating time to market. You don't have to wait to ship a product out because you're waiting on a service manual to be completed. There's none of that. You have the illustrations and the documentation being done more concurrently. And at the end of the day, it's making your customers and users more happy. There's nothing worse than having a manual or instructions that are incomplete or incorrect or outdated. We can keep everything accurate and then at the end of the day, more graphically clear as well. All right, so that really covers everything that I wanted to touch on. And with that, I could take any questions that we have and pass it over to you, Rob.
Excellent. Well, Paul, thank you very much, man. Appreciate the detail, the overview. It's pretty quick, but it's also very effective and very informative. If anybody needs more of an in-depth demonstration on Creo Illustrate or any other Creo product for that matter, or PTC Windchill, you can just respond to me via email by replying to the webinar invitation that you received. They come directly to me, or you can contact us at info, at 3hti.com. So Paul, great job. And once again, yeah, I can't emphasize enough that this works with any CAD data. It doesn't matter where the CAD data comes from. You can use it, which is really cool. So next week, our webinar will focus on the GD&T advisor, geometric dimensioning and tolerancing. So that is usually a very big draw as well. So looking forward to next week's webinar. And Paul, I think you're helping us out with that. So it'll be good to see you next week. So that's going to be it for our webinar today, everyone. Thanks for being on. We appreciate it. Thank you, Paul, and everybody have a great rest of your week.